Better not leave the meeting, eh? Remo, do you want to start?
Ladies first. Yes.
Okay, so Remo and I have worked together on a couple of different projects. So today we're going to talk about what students can tell us about their learning experiences from a students as partners perspective, focusing on projects in engineering education. And we'll look at some institutional issues as well as some other things to do with the student experience. The agenda broadly, we're not going to stick completely to this, but SaP, Students as Partners initiatives, and links to the literature, the Students as Partners or SSP program, Student Staff Partnership Program as it's called at UQ. Look at some examples from the literature and case studies, different sort of models, so hybrid models of student partnership, and we'll look at some outlooks and conclusions, and hopefully we'll have time for discussion. One of the things I realized when I was working on these slides with Remo is all of the acronyms, and I apologize if you're not familiar with them. Just ask if you're not aware, because there's a lot. So this is a model of student-staff partnership in higher education that was developed by Mick Healy in 2014. Student staff partnerships or students as partners in higher education roughly has a decade-long history, so it's not a very long period of time for a community of scholars and for the students themselves to engage in this sort of work. But it's a really, I think, energizing, exciting, challenging sometimes space for both the students and the staff members. One of the things that the model is really good at demonstrating is the sorts of activities that you might like to consider students could be involved with. So some of those are more like learning and teaching focused and to do with assessment and their understandings and perhaps even development of assessment activities. Some of them are around curriculum design and students acting as pedagogic consultants. Some of them involve students involved in research and inquiry, so students as co-researchers, and some projects involve students in the scholarship of teaching and learning itself. There's less in that space, but that is an active area. I guess just to say, I did mention that this is an unfamiliar area or territory for both students and staff, and I think it's difficult sometimes for both parties for staff to sometimes maybe let go of some of the aspects of being in charge and control, because that's what they're perhaps more or less used to. And it's difficult for students to step up, and they sometimes feel constrained in, I guess, their engagement in this space. So it's important to create that sort of positive environment for students to share their perspectives. Approaches to students as partners. So I had a look at the wider literature and the engineering education literature. So the wider literature, there's a lot of examples of students involved in curriculum and assessment development or review. So as I said, students might create projects, assessment projects. They might be involved in developing more personalized learning. They might help create or clarify marking rubrics. And they might even, in some cases, help in exam creation. That was probably a formative exam rather than a summative one. I think it was for vet science in that particular example. There's also good examples of students engaged in technology-enhanced learning, so creating learning resources, and that involves students identifying their own learning needs and recognising what would be valuable to them. Or students co-researching what digital technologies or other resources would be good to support their learning. I did find a really great example, Zhao et al. 2023, so quite recent, described their experiences of engaging students as co-researchers in qualitative research projects. This was from a research-intensive university in Hong Kong. And there's ongoing work in the space of engaging students in scholarship of teaching and learning. In engineering education, it's a little bit harder at the moment, at least with my searches, to find lots of examples. There are some. So Dunn et al. Described the development of learning resources in first-year engineering, looking at the relevance of mathematics to their future studies and careers. Caños de las Heras, they'll talk about participatory design in the creation of virtual laboratories in biochemical engineering. Brown also engaged in some co-creation of online learning resources. So I guess the take home from that is things like thermodynamics and microelectronics. It seems to be mostly that the students are being engaged in creating resources for their fellow students in areas that are maybe troublesome or problematic for students in terms of learning, and maybe like a threshold or a gap in knowledge that is better addressed by students identifying things that help them. I did put one of Remo and my papers in here in 2022. As with Zhao, we looked at engaging students as co-researchers in their experiences of the shift to online learning during COVID-19 lockdown, and what they hoped to keep, what changed, what they didn't want to change, and what they wanted to have, stay the same as a result of that disruption to their learning. I think that's a less common way of engaging students as partners in engineering education and in the broader literature, but I might be mistaken. There might be people doing stuff in that space and I'm not aware of it, but it's an interesting space to work in. Okay. If you're happy for me to keep going on this one, cool. So at UQ, we have two separate approaches to engaging students as partners. So one is the Student Staff Partnership, or SSP, format, and there's a grant or a scholarship that pays students between, I think, $500 and $1,500 per project. It's centrally funded. Students can come from anywhere, and they can be a variety of students from all different disciplines working in the same team. There's mostly short-term projects, but they can be up to 20 weeks. It's possible to request an extension, but it's quite difficult to get a repeat project on the same theme or topic. And students usually only are involved in one project at a time, although they can shift, I guess, and work on a different project to work at two at once or more. That's possible. The student-led observation for course improvement, which is an old, I say old, it's 5 years old, but SLOKI team is a slightly different model. It's an employment relationship, so people are paid, the students are paid by the hour. It's funded in our case through the Faculty of Engineering, Architecture and Information Technology, although there is also a science faculty SLOKI team. In my case, or in our case, the students are from EAT, Engineering, Architecture and IT only. It's a casual role. It's quite distinct in terms of the SSP because the students can stay for as long as they're UQ students and as long as they want to, I guess. They often end up, unfortunately for me and for the faculty, going on to other bigger and better things. Just as they get this amazing insight and skill set, of course, they all graduate, which is brilliant for them. But they do have a different approach and a different remit, I guess, from the SSP projects. And they can be working on multiple projects simultaneously. There's often 3, 4, 5 things that different subsets of the team are engaged with. One of the things that we noticed through doing this work was we looked at students as partners across the different faculties, and I apologize for the acronyms again: HAS, Humanities and Social Sciences; FOM, Faculty of Medicine; HABS, Humanities and Health and Behavioral Sciences; FOS, Faculty of Science, BEL, Business, Economics and Law; and EAT, Engineering, Architecture and IT. And you can see across the different years, there's been different levels of engagement by the faculties in Students as Partners projects, or SSP projects, at UQ. And there's a couple of peaks that I'm not entirely sure how to explain. In 2019, I guess there was more funding available in 2019. In 2018, the project was at its infancy, so there wasn't as much take up. HAS seems to have had a quite good take up across all years. In 2020, as we're all well aware, funding kind of drastically reduced. But what's really, really striking from Remo's perspective and mine is this lack of engagement with EAT. Engineering, architecture and IT seems to be lagging substantially behind the other faculties in terms of uptake. And one person said to me, oh, it's probably because you have Sloki. I'm like, yeah, sure, but that doesn't explain the Faculty of Science figures, for instance. They have Sloki too, and they still pretty much have more students as partners projects than Health and Behavioural Sciences or Bell, and definitely more than us. So it's not entirely due to the fact that we both have Sloki that there's lack of engagement in EAT. I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's a workload thing, maybe it's, I don't know. I'm not sure how to explain it. It's just an anomaly that we're kind of perplexed by, and we possibly would like to change, but we can't, we can't force people to engage in students as partners, however much we think it's a fantastic initiative. All right. Engagement with Sloki is a little different. It's similar projects, I guess. So Sloki are involved in courses like course redesign, course review. They're involved in technology enhanced learning projects, so reviewing or helping create modules for other students. They've done several assessment review projects. They've worked on first year and redesigning curriculum, general curriculum projects. They've been involved in a number of teaching and learning projects where people had to bid competitively for grants within the faculty, and so they've worked on those. There's been quite a few conference presentations or research papers that they've contributed to as co-authors or as researchers. And I didn't want to exclude the Sloki team members themselves, because the impact of being involved in this space is on them as well. They learn a lot from that experience. And then the thing that struck me the most is the total number of students that we've ever impacted. I have no idea how to quantify that, because there are so many students whose, I guess, experience of their course would have been impacted through Sloki helping to redesign the assessment criteria to make it clearer, or redesigning course documentation to make it more straightforward for students to navigate their way through the course. So I don't have a number for that, but it's worth thinking about the impact that we do have in that broader perspective. All right, now I think it's Remo's turn.
Yeah, I'm happy to take over. Thank you very much. Just what Melanie just said, it's quite a mystery to us actually why engineering is so little engaged in students as partners, the Students as Partners program. So, and I didn't know about the program either. It was a couple of years when we actually had our project, it was last year. So yeah, it could be just a matter of cultural things. So do we actually teach engineering in a way that kind of prevents us from reaching out and just collaborating with students outside of the classroom? But I think that's not really fair to say. But yeah, just looking at how this program is advertised or promoted, or the knowledge of it in our faculty is pretty poor. So one of the initiatives, or I think agendas that we have, is to kind of promote this program a bit better in the faculty, and just try to increase the uptake and the engagement in that program. So the next slide I'm going to show you is basically what are we doing, or what I'm doing at the moment in the faculty, just really rotating through the teaching and learning committee meetings and also the school meetings, and just advertising this program a bit better. So just try to emphasize the benefits, but also the pitfalls, I think, of it working with students in this environment. So on this slide, I think the quote here says it all. So it's definitely a very non-traditional approach. So it's collaborative and reciprocal. And I think the word that's missing here is also responsibility that staff and students share. But if you jump to the next slide, I think I'll explain it a bit better. Thank you. So there's different models, I think, or there's roles that student-staff partnerships can have. And I'm pretty sure even at Griffith and at other universities, the student representation or the student voice is kind of captured, right? So, but having students actually on committees or just on advisory boards. So representation of students in these groups and programs, I think, is important and is already done. Student voice, by feedback through lunch meetings can be also informal. I think that's also, I think, kind of a given. But the thing that was really new for me was this partnership project idea. So, and if you skip to the next slide, I'll just more. So again, the program was launched, I think, at UQ in 2018, and it is pretty alien because of this concept that it empowers students and staff simultaneously, so that this barrier that is there, or between, also at least in the classroom, for some reason, is completely removed in this concept, in this program. So that I think will become clear when we talk about our project as well. So that is very very unusual, and it makes it kind of difficult for both staff and students to approach it in a way. So this I think that might just take time just to really get used to this kind of concept, but it is really about just operating and working, collaborating on the same level. That the quality is really emphasized. All the values of the program are also listed on the slide. So that's collaboration, creativity, also respect. So that's also quite important. We just want to skip the next slide. Thanks. So there have been many benefits already. So Melanie mentioned that this whole concept of students as partners is about a decade old. So, and I think the UK was the first country or nation that implemented it, and it's also now quite common in the States. So there's been quite a lot of literature that has reported on the benefits of for the students and also for staff. So I'm just listing here a few of those. Definitely for the students, so they develop new skills. Right? So there's just approach, I think, collaboration a little differently because they have staff in their team. So there's just again, it's a bit of uncharted territory for them. So they're getting engaged, and at least at UQ, I don't know much about the programs at other universities, but at UQ, they're also gonna get a kind of a grant, right? Some monetary benefit from engaging in the program, and likewise for staff, it is, and I think we can really speak from our own personal experience. It is quite a unique, it's a unique experience to work with students in a team, and kind of just not really sitting in the driver's seat and giving them also the same responsibility of achieving the project goals that we all agree on at the beginning. So it's a very like I said, a very unique concept, and it might take just a few years for people just to adapt it. Next slide, please. So the framework, at least at UQ, is that we have basically 4 times per year where people can put forward a project idea, and this idea can be put forward by students, but also for staff. So the prerequisite or the condition is that a team always consists of staff and students, and the program is quite adamant in keeping this kind of balanced. So usually projects that have 3 staff and 1 student, or 4 staff and 1 student, wouldn't go basically through. So I think it would be, again, this equality again is a key issue here. So both parties can put forward a project idea, but they need to work together. So, and these projects can run between 15 and 20 weeks. So usually it's kind of depending a little bit on the time of the year, but the majority of the projects are 15 weeks long. And it's going to be kept at 4 students per team, and likewise with staff. Right? And again, depending on the duration, it's up to $1,500 that students receive for their participation. For staff, obviously, that is more in kind. But it's anybody who is enrolled in UQ can engage in this program, and the same for professional staff at the university. So and so the realm of or the different subjects, topics that are targeted here by the projects are teaching and learning and student experience, and I think to a lesser degree, when I look at the projects that have been put forward, also governance and strategy. Next slide, please. Yep. So a few stats. So I think since launching the program, we had a couple, well, not a couple, we had about 675, probably now 680 projects. So that is about 120 projects per year. So for 4 rounds, it usually just breaks down to 30, 35 projects per round. So and if you just do the math, so I think the whole program has at least an annual budget of about $500,000. So it's not a small program that is rolled out. So lots of engagement with so 120 projects. Unfortunately, not so many at least up until this point in the engineering faculty. So I hope we're gonna change that. And on the left-hand side, you can just see a few more conditions. Again, so maybe what might be important or interesting for you is the selection criteria. So I think they're on the next slide. So when you put forward the project idea, so it's kind of a formal process. So you have to address these selection criteria: motivation, innovation, scope, flexibility, also the student staff partnership ethos, and the need for partnership. So they all actually count equally. It's just 2 points per selection criteria. I did actually put a few project ideas forward, but 2 of them were rejected because the flexibility, what you see here, so that the project appears sufficiently flexible to enable all partners to contribute to their perspective. So basically, the program came back to me and said, okay, you put forward a project, but it reads more like a research proposal, not really like so somebody actually driving it, right? So and not giving the students enough space to grow. So and that is again just reemphasizes how important it is for the program that to have this barrier removed and everybody really contributing equally to the project. So quite interesting, and something you definitely need to know when you put forward a project. That is really stated clearly. So who does what, and that the academics or the professional staff don't really just are too pushy in terms of getting the project to the project goal. Maybe the next slide. So the program itself is actually quite well organized. So once let's say once you have been successful in obtaining such a grant or such a proposal, so once it's submitted and then granted, then I'd say 90% of the projects are initiated by staff. So and then to the tutor selection process, we just have a look at the applicants. So students usually just look at the different projects that have been put forward and just say, okay, I'm interested in this and this, and so then the students are selected, and then the program really organizes a meeting with the team, so the selected students and the staff, and give you a proper induction. And once the induction has been finalized, so the project really runs. So that is then the first day of the project, and they're quite strict also on the timeline. So for our project, I'm going to talk about it in a second. We had 15 weeks, and the team induction was even before the start of the semester. So that was kind of a little surprise. So when we had our project, so then the payment for the students is linked to the milestones. So the first milestone would be the project plan. That's after a couple of weeks. And then also after the project report is received by the student staff program, so then they get their second installment. Next slide.
Yep.
Thanks. Do you want to quickly explain the word cloud? So I think you created it. But...
Yeah, so I went through all of the projects. I think this is 1 year's worth of data, and put them into a format that could be used in a word cloud. And you can see some of the things cropping up that we've already talked about in terms of co-design, co-creation, collaborative. So these were taken from the titles of the projects. So teaching, strategy, and the student, of course, crops up as the most common thing, which is to be expected. But you can see some of the ideas starting to show through, like blended learning and initiative, all of the same acronyms, I guess, before from the faculty level. There's some work integrated learning projects. I think it's good to just see the mix, and that this redesign, blending, community review, all of those things. I think it's a great example of the breadth of projects. Like, there's a huge range and from many different spaces. So it was just my attempt to try and make some kind of sense of where all of these very disparate projects, where they might be heading. And as I said, it's only a word cloud, so it's not a perfect representation, but it's a really good summary of the different projects at UQ in that particular year. Okay.
So here's a bit of a summary of a few of the students as partners projects that have been run actually in the engineering faculty. So you can use it, for instance, as to kind of tweak or just get an idea about teaching and learning, and maybe tweaking your course a little bit. Just getting a bit more input from students, so that just not really on a large scale, but definitely just to just see what's there might be some pain points and then what students would like to actually hear and listen to when they taking a new subject. We did our project, and we're going to talk about that on the next slides, on feedback strategies. So that is a more generic or general topic in terms of what students and staff also would like to see in terms of having a bit more of an adaptive feedback. And there's two other examples here that rather relate to the student experience, so onboarding of and engagement of international students. Again, quite general, but definitely I think an important topic. And also the breaking down barriers culturally and linguistically for diverse international students. So again, you can just really play on different topics and subjects, student experience, teaching and learning, but also governance, for instance. Do you want to jump to the next slide?
Yep.
Just course of time. So just want to quickly just talk about our project as well. So this diagram here that you see is very similar to the model that Melanie introduced at the beginning. So it's just the kind of the engagement and emphasis that the student voice has. And we specifically angled our project on the fourth quadrant. So that really means that the students, and that's what the students as partners program really is about, where students really sit in the driver's seat and a bit more active, rather than just sitting on a committee or just giving feedback about a course, how it should be run. So we really wanted to work with them together just to find out what is it what you want, what is it what your peers want in terms of feedback. So specifically, I think we all know that the pain point of feedback systems is well, you only get it or mostly get it at the end of the year. So are there other strategies that might inform you better in terms of teaching? So that was the overarching goal. So just to work with students and have them actually come up with their own ideas, but also then interviewing their peers and also staff in terms of what is out there. So what could you envision being implemented at UQ at some point would help you and also staff. Next slide. So basically the project is to get this feedback and or just looking at different feedback strategies. We split it up into three different phases. The first one was obviously just having a literature review and research and looking what's out there. And also just identifying how we actually want to do conduct the surveys within EduQ. I think I forgot to mention that all the students we had were also from different faculties, so that's was also quite an interesting point. So they were not necessarily engineering students, but that's we actually wanted to have a broad scope of different ideas. So we didn't do that just in the engineering faculty, but we specifically also just picked students that came from other faculties, so that we had kind of connecting points. So the students were also just really acting as agents of just opening doors and looking at the broader scope of UQ. Phase 2 was then to train the students for I think the focus is missing there, so focus group discussions. So that's what we wanted to have. So usually that was 2 students were conducting focus group discussions either with 4 staff or 4 students. And also the phase 2 included just to develop certain questions so that could be asked in the focus group discussions, but mainly training actually the students to be able to conduct these focus group discussions. At the bottom, there's a timeline. As I mentioned before, when we had the induction, that was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before the semester started. So we could kind of communicate with the students at the beginning, but I think that's where the first difficulties kind of arose, because not many of them were on campus. So that there's a bit of a misalignment that was round 1 of the year. So there's a bit of a misalignment between actually student presence and start of the semester. It can be okay. It can be good if because it doesn't really clash with their time schedule and when they have to attend lectures. But so that's the presence and availability was definitely a bit of an issue at the beginning. Scheduling then focus group discussions in different faculties within a certain time frame was also kind of difficult or challenging. So that's when we actually got to phase 3 and really conducting the focus group discussions, we were starting to run out of time. So actually we did run out of time. So on in June 22. And next slide, please. Yeah. That's where Melanie's Sloki team would at least would fortunately be able to kind of finish what we started with the SaP project. So it's definitely good to have an alternative in this sense. And also, I think as a takeaway message, time management is very key. So and again, that's I think again attributed to the fact that if you're not really allowed to manage the project in a way you would probably manage a research project, so then things can get a bit out of hand, or just it's managing. So on this zero barrier concept is definitely a bit of a challenge. At least it was for us doing it for the first time. I think there were definitely some lessons learned.
I think it was good because we had one person from the SSP though who stayed and became a team member of Sloki, so that helped.
Yep, correct. Yeah,
yep.
Thanks. Just want to jump to the next slide.
Yep.
All right, so let's quickly some results. Again, I'm just cautious in terms of time, so if we just have 5 to 10 minutes left, and we might cut it up rather quickly. But so from our project, we didn't really expect ground-shaking results in terms of now everybody knows what kind of feedback is appropriate for their course. But it was really good just to get a few staff and students together and just come up with at least some ideas. Definitely, I think everybody, and it was also not that surprising, but everybody would like to actually have some kind of feedback that is different to just the end of semester results. Students definitely would like to see some more transparency, how their feedback is actually used, and also definitely more timely, and especially around assessment items. So I think that is that was quite important. But yeah, so I think in every focus group discussion, it was kind of the consensus that kind of a mix of feedback. So at different times of the year, different level of depth, I think, as well. And I think one idea that kept coming up is just, I mean, using obviously modern technology, and there's already an example in the literature that also was researched, right? So just using basically your mobile phone as to provide quick feedback in terms of individual or single lectures, right, or lessons. So that does definitely give staff immediate feedback on whether, well, if something is if some concepts are too complex, right, and they can just kind of respond to that fairly quickly in the next lecture. So how do we go from there? So again, these students as partners projects are 15 maximum 20-week projects. So if I think we can just scope out some opportunities. Right? So, but if you want to really implement, let's say, a new feedback strategy system, that obviously you need a proper teaching grant, or just a university-wide grant to really test and trial that. So that's probably beyond just students as partners, but it's definitely good in terms of collecting ideas, and again making actually staff and also students aware of this type of collaboration, right? And just getting to know each other a little bit better outside of the classroom. Next slide. So a few points in terms of the perspective I think that we had running this student as partners project. It's definitely a great opportunity in terms of networking, just even for us, just going a little bit outside of our shell and just outside of the own faculty and working with students, but also staff from other faculties with these focus group discussions. It is some kind of providing mentorship. As Melanie said, one of our SSP projects students started then working for Sloki, so there was kind of a passing on the torch and mentoring. Like I said, I've applied a few times for the students as partners program, and it is competitive. So if they only have a certain budget, which is big, but they also have to fund then 30 to 35 projects per year, so it is competitive. So not every project gets up. So if you have an idea, you might have to do that, maybe put in an application once or twice, so until it's really tweaked and then addresses the selection criteria appropriately. There's a limit in terms of budget, so what the students are getting out of it. So if they work outside of the campus, they might get a much better payment. So just to motivate them and to get enough students is probably a bit of an issue for the program. But then in terms of team selection and team dynamics, that's also something you want to be mindful about. So students, especially from different faculties, I think on different backgrounds, they have different characteristics and different team working skills. So and again, just managing that is probably required, but again, so you don't want to really overstep that in the mark, and then just really just guiding them too much. Again, that's not what students as partners is about. And I think it's a learning curve, and I think you get better with time in terms of just running those projects, just having this whole barrier removal, just to really adapt to it. That's definitely an issue at the beginning for both students and staff. So I think that's was a very mutual experience. Next slide. So quickly on the student perspective, I think most of them did actually enjoy working with us. There's definitely a benefit in terms of not only to skill up their teamwork, but also communication and on interpersonal skills, learning how to communicate with staff, doing actually interviews. So that was all actually quite positive. Again, sometimes I think, but you probably encountered it in every team. So team dynamics can be a bit of an issue. Maybe let's jump to the next slide. So let's just use time. So.
Okay, I just will quickly go through. So SaP was started in 2018 after a successful 2017 engineering, architecture and IT teaching and learning grant. I've explained some of this already, so I won't go through that in great detail. Originally, they were envisioned as conducting in-class observations using recognised, say, observation protocols. So COPUS, the Classroom Observation Protocol for Undergraduate STEM, is one of the tools that I trained the students to use. And we envisioned them as representing the student cohort and being able to be a voice for issues going on for students, but working with their course cohort, but also working with the course coordinators. We talk about them here at UQ. So this was just a high-level model where we thought that the SaP team would be involved in the classroom, observing what was going on in the classroom. They'd be representatives of their student cohort. They could engage with that cohort and find out what their pain points or issues were with their learning experience, and they could relay those back to the course coordinator. The observation protocol was also chosen because it was perceived as relatively objective and therefore less kind of challenging, I guess, for staff to engage with. Staff, the ones that are involved in this space and interested, don't tend to have an issue with asking students for much more direct feedback, which is what we ended up doing, which I'll come to shortly. We conceived of this as a learning partnership. So we were learning as well as the students learning. So we're learning from them, they're learning and they're developing their identity, I guess, within the team and within that space as a representative of other students. They're bringing their own context or their own belief systems and knowledge to this work, and so do we. And it's still about sharing authority and expertise. This is a really early piece of work that SaP did. They were using either the COPUS tool or the Portal tool, so the practical observation rubric, to assess active learning. They were trained to use both of those. And they did some in-class observation, but as you can see, the course coordinator for this particular project also wanted focus groups, and they also did some document analysis, so reviewing materials that were provided to students. There were some survey results, and all of this work is information that they put together. So this was a poster that was presented at the National Students as Partners Roundtable in 2018 by the original members of the SaP team. Some key sort of SaP projects: we work with ITS, Information Technology Services, which is our central IT university, on an SSP project. So we did some, I guess, technical or technological reviews. So Allocate Plus is our timetabling system that replaced what they called the Hunger Games style timetabling system. We looked at Maze Maps, which is a wayfaring tool. So we did a review of that to see if it would help people navigate their way around campus. And we also mentored ITS's student staff partnership projects. We did a lot of course reviews. I've been involved in reviews of a tool called My Programming Tutor, which is designed to help students develop basic programming skills in an online environment. We worked with Remo on another project analysing and improving online learning that I alluded to earlier, which occurred during the acute phase of COVID. And we're currently working on an English for academic communication or English language support project, looking at reviewing, conducting surveys and focus groups or interviews with students about their experiences and what they would require in the future. I think one of the things we wanted to highlight with this presentation too is that there's a different level of, I guess, participation or or process with SLOCI and student staff partnership. So I think the student staff partnerships projects the students have a lot more influence and choice in the direction of the projects. They have a little bit more control than the SLOCI team. SLOCI tend to have projects come from staff, although that's not to say that they couldn't, I guess, instigate a project. We've got one on at the moment that is really, I think, a student initiated one, but from the science SLOCI team, not the EAT one, which is looking at generative AI and how students are using generative AI. And we're trying to look at that from a more positive space. So that originally came from science, but EAT developed their own kind of approach to looking at that within the engineering, architecture and IT faculty. So although I'm saying that I think students have less control in SLOCI, they could still influence projects if they came up with something that then gained traction and was deemed sort of be of great importance, I guess, for the faculty as a whole. We've already talked about this, but so I won't dwell on that. We just wanted to re-emphasize the distinctions between the two groups. We're nearly actually there, despite having lots of slides. I think from our perspective, some of the things that we can take away from this is that there's an enhanced sense of student engagement through working in these projects. There's potential to develop a much more inclusive learning environment and for students to feel a much stronger sense of belonging. The benefits to engaging in these projects are fairly well documented in the literature, and they also have occurred from our successful examples of projects that we've engaged in. I think one of the key things is that students are much more likely to get honest feedback from their peers than if I go to interview them or if Remo maybe goes to interview them. You know, they'll say things to their peers they won't say to us. And I think that's a key benefit in learning what's going on in reality for students. They bring an alternative perspective and insight that we wouldn't get otherwise. And it's great for developing their skills. The key pitfalls, I think, there's key times of the year where they're just not engaged in these projects because they're too busy, really understandably so, and completely, believably so. That's what they need to do. They're here to graduate, and so they're focused on exams and assessments. I think it's a requirement to really focus on the goals and what's achievable, and enhancing communication is one way of doing that. I think the funding is always an issue. There's interesting work, but sometimes it doesn't get completed, and it's really easy to lose momentum or lose opportunities when the team moves on or disperses, or there's a lag in projects getting started or completing. I think the key recommendations from these are adapted from Dunn et al. Is but to ensure that students involved in any project have agreed who's responsible for what, and be clear with students about expectations. To have high expectations of students, but always be able to be supportive and assist them as needed. To keep in contact with students, it's very easy for things to drift. And they might feel stuck and not able to ask you questions, but it's good to keep that that two-way communication going. Students might need help that they're not aware that there's ways of working through things. So it's good to kind of keep engaged and work through ways of working with staff as well that don't alienate them. Making sure that things are, I guess, positive for both parties, and looking through strategies to ensure that positive success. I guess the other thing that I think is important is to determine the type and scope of project, and then determine what funding source might best suit that, because that might determine, at least in our case, whether it's an SaP or student staff partnership style of project or a SLOCI type project is best suited to that work. I think the outlook, I guess, we've got funding constraints here, as I'm sure most of you are aware of, and have the same sorts of funding constraints. COVID-19 had a huge impact on the funding available for these sorts of projects. I think domestically, Australia has a really good and robust interest in students as partners, and there's a list of institutions that I found online that are engaged in this space. Globally, there's similar initiatives in the US and the United Kingdom, some in China, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Canada, a range of places. In some of these institutions, I guess there's more ability for students to initiate and commence projects on their own than other institutions, and that's all down to that local or global context that each institution operates in. That's it. There's lots of references, but I'm happy to share those in any case.
Thanks, Melanie, and thanks, Remo, for your presentation.
4 minutes for questions.
Yeah, okay, 4 minutes. Are there any questions? I have a few. I just want to see if anybody else would like to ask. If you have questions, you can put them on the chat. I just want to ask you a question. Like you talk about SLOCI, right?
Yep.
So is it for like all levels of students? Is like from like year 1 to year 4? I don't know. Like you have like 4 years program, right? And if like for all like students, how many students kind of engage in this SLOCI, I think?
So originally we envisaged it as an engineering only initiative, and we had civil, chemical, mechanical. Thanks, Rosalind. I lost my electrical. So we had 4 engineering disciplines engaged, and they were from years 3 and 4 of our 4-year degree. It was an oversight not to have somebody from architecture, but that wasn't the way it was set up initially. We then expanded it to include students from architecture and to focus more on the IT computer science side of the work we do for the students and the degree programs that we have here. At the moment, there's 4 students again. We lost 2. They graduated mid-year, and we got 2 new ones. I think we've had 19 students in total across the
19, like 90 or 19?
No,
Sorry.
19, 19.
19.
I wish I had 90 in a way. That would be quite challenging to coordinate. We have had first-year students because in 2018 we employed some first-year students to work on a particular aspect of the project, and then we asked them if they wanted to stay, and they did. And at one point I had 7 team members at once. I think I actually also had another group, and then one dropped out, so she ended up having to go back home to India due to illness, unfortunately. So we've had, it varies, it's up and down.
Okay, I just see a question from Professor Salmon. It's not the students have always been collaboration in one way or another. I have one query. Is it not that students have always been collaborators in one way? I think the question is that students maybe not part of SLOCI, but they try to maybe collaborate with engineering stuff. Is it like the case or something?
I think I might know what you're talking about. So yes, I agree. In some ways, students are always collaborators in one way or another. And when I first started, I guess, learning about this area and working here, I'm kind of like, well, isn't that what people just do? Like they work with students, they engage students. But this is slightly different, I guess, because it's more than one course. It's not just situated within a course or maybe even within a program. And it's, I guess, there's different levels of engagement. So this is either for more student-focused issues in the case of the student staff partnership projects, or in the case of SLOCI, it's for things that don't normally go on, like the sorts of collaborations that perhaps don't normally go on. So the SLOCI team received training in teaching and learning terminology, in how to, I guess, do observations in class. So it's maybe a different sort of collaboration than is normal. But I agree, I understand that, you know, we should always be collaborating with students. I think this really places the emphasis on the student side of that.
Can I just quickly jump onto that? So obviously we have summer or winter research projects, which is also collaborating with students. Then you have the SLOCI team, which is quite often funded by teaching and learning grants. So that's kind of a more long-lasting, I think, employment and engagement, and the students as partners projects. That is really just the small projects, but they allow at least us to collaborate across also the university and with completely different student cohorts, because you have this pool that you can select from, and it's just like we said, actually more just to increase the sense of belonging as well. That's all.
Oh, thanks. Well, I think we probably already need to finish. It's like people already leaving. I just want to thank you first, and then if you have a second, just want to ask you like one more question. Is it okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
So like, you know, like when you like get like students doing this SSP, right, which is student staff partnership, right? So is it part of the kind of course program that like do they get any credits for that because they like work for 20 weeks, or do they only get like this like some money, which is like $1,500, right? So what is their benefit to do that? Because that's like 20 weeks of like working, and when you say like weeks, it's like how many hours per week they will have to contribute, because that's like lots of commitment, but the like money is not that much, so they probably that's why they like maybe like don't want to do it in engineering, because they can actually like easily find a job somewhere else and do like that, right?
Oh,
Do you have
okay.
like any kind of like thoughts or comments? That's like
I do
what
have
we
a thought.
typically have like what we have here at Griffin, because sometimes we have like students who get this industry partnerships or like something, right? They work in the industry, so like they can get paid for that, and they may not get engaged in these programs because they be like, we have to do this like every week, but we like busy like making money. So do we have like kind of like similar thing at UQ?
I've got a comment about that. So the Sloki team get paid as a casual rate on the HUA scale. It's HUA 4.1, and it works out to close to $50 an hour.
$50 per hour?
Close to.
Oh,
It's about
that's like lots of money.
Yeah. So the Sloki team isn't too bad a proposition.
Yeah.
Whatever hours you work is what you get paid for.
Okay, so
Better
that's
than
kind of
minimum
casual stuff.
wage. But the student staff partnership projects are a different category altogether. And although I have absolutely no objection to the student staff partnership projects, my really, really, really cutting answer to that is if you take $1,500 and divide it by minimum wage, that is the ballpark number of hours you should be spending on the project. And I'm not even suggesting that our students should be paid minimum wage. I'm just saying that's a rough guide. And if you're doing more than that, then it's kind of, to my mind, becoming exploitative.
Yeah, that was exactly one of the facts that was kind of hurting us a little bit, or biting a little bit back. So I think you can't really expect them to work more than 3 or 4 hours per week on the project. So, and sometimes, like, you know, if you have to make hay when the sun shines, and you just get a lot of people that are available for focus group discussions, and you just run into this problem of the students not being really motivated to just do the extra work. Right?
I think we have kind of like similar here, because we have some students who are like really want to help us. They're like really motivated to help, and then they kind of do it like not because of money, because of this like will they like want to contribute to like our like school, right? But there are like not like many of them, because others, they either like work somewhere else, like a part-time job, or they just don't really want to do that because they're doing something else. So it can be a little bit difficult to like engage them in this kind of program. And if it goes for like 20 weeks, like most like probably like nobody will do it at Griffin, let me say. Not much money or something, but only a few people. But I think this is really good, what you're doing. It just in terms of money and the funding, I think it's very difficult to like keep it going, I believe.
Yeah, there have been times where I thought it wasn't going to keep going. Believe me,
It's going.
Yeah. Well, it's been going for 5 years. The Sloki team. So we have new students coming and going, and the student staff partnership projects have been going for 5 years, but they're different people each time. Yeah.
So, do you have like a budget from the school or like from the uni? Like where's like all this money comes from? Because there's like as you said, like 675 projects. So, and if they're all funded, so there should be like lots of money. Where's the money come from?
I can't tell you where the central money comes from. Right? Where the faculty money comes from is the faculty leadership team allocates
They
a
allocate money for this.
certain percentage of
okay.
funds per year.
Okay.
They didn't used to do that. Originally, we had a teaching and learning grant that in 2018. So it was 2017. We were awarded the grant in 2018. We didn't spend all of the money. In 2018, we were allowed to carry it over to 2019.
Okay.
We got some
So
extra
that's where the
funding.
money.
Yeah, we got some extra funding in 2019 from the student voice people who got Sloki in to come and train up the SSP students, because Sloki had more knowledge and skills relevant to that. So they paid for Sloki to go and teach their students. So we got extra money. ITS, our central IT team, gave us funding in 2019, and they were going to again in 2020, but as we all know, 2020 all the money got taken out of everything. So and we almost didn't survive 2020, but we did.
I see.
Maybe just to add to this, so at least for our students as partners project, I think at least some of the students got something of it. So they were also presenting their work at a symposium. So they got a bit of a forum just to get this kind of experience. And we also put them on a conference paper, right, and A squared E squared as well. So I know it's not really just maybe something that they are it's a priority for them in the short term, but yeah, but that's at least adds to their portfolio as well, and there's some benefit from it.
Well, thanks for your time, guys, and thanks for sharing your experience with us. We have like kind of similar like something to maybe Sloki. We have like somebody who helping us. Yeah. But you also said that you have students who will go and also observe, somebody's lectures, right? And then like talk to students. I don't think we have this. We have like actually academics who will do that, like not students. We have like this program at Griffith, and it's kind of like where we've got it like for like many years. I think it was called like Pro Teaching Pass, and now like it's called Sport. So, but we don't have students doing that. We just only have academics, but we have students just helping us with kind of like everyday kind of business, what we have, like, like open days or something like that, they would come and help us. They would talk to our students, and we have also clubs, and we try to like students like run those clubs, so that like other students, they get together, they help each other and things like that. But we don't have like Sloki like what you have. I think it's kind of a different thing. And
it's interesting because the Sloki team, it's actually really easy for them to learn to do the in-class observation using
that's true. We just never thought about this, that like students would go and observe academics presenting. Typically what we do, we actually like if we have like somebody like academic who would go and observe another academic, so that would talk to students and ask them for their feedback. So would have kind of like surveys, but now we don't do that. We don't do like surveys anymore. But before we would have like surveys of students, and students will try it like what they like want or what they don't want. We have like other like student surveys in week 4 and week 6. That's like we have like many things too, but not exactly like the way that like Sloki is doing that.
No, we have peer review where staff go and observe other staff. It's less probably common than it could be. Yeah, cool. See ya.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Yeah.